Greetings to all my Star Wars fans. Dr. Jones here for an interesting episode of Tales from Tyranus today. We're all locked up in the house. We're trying to do our social distancing, haven't been able to do a lot of trooping. I've been keeping busy doing building and reaching out and watching a lot of YouTube videos. And I stumbled across this channel that is amazing. If you haven't seen it, you got to go out and check out the Smuggler's Room. It is a wonderful, fun channel all about Star Wars inspired things. You even get a couple of interesting non-Star Wars things in there. But the gentleman who runs the channel, Brian Thompson, was kind enough to Zoom call with me and do this video interview. So I'd love to introduce you to my new friend, the smuggler himself, Brian Thompson. Brian, can you introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about your channel?
Hey guys, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited, especially my passion for the 501st and all of what you all do is just, I don't know, it's on a different level and it's just incredible to watch. And I'm really thrilled to be here. We started a channel because my wife said, if you're going to tear apart our basement and build it into something ridiculous, then at least you need to film it so we have some kind of documentation. And it kind of spun out from there, and it's grown into kind of an animal for lack of a better word. And we're just kind of now having a blast. Every time we look at something, we say, let's build something ridiculous out of that, and we'll put it up and see if that inspires anybody to get out into a shop or a workspace or whatever it is and start building on their own. That's really what the whole goal has been.
Yeah, so if you didn't pick up on what Brian was talking about, or maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves, Brian has changed his basement into the ultimate Star Wars geek fan club, space, Millennium Falcon-esque, Star Wars display-esque, you name it. It's one of the largest projects I've ever seen anybody try to take on. Can you tell us about that project?
Yeah, it's actually the third version I've been working on. Sadly, when I was a kid, my dad had always had this plan of building a clubhouse above my grandfather's shed, and in this he was going to use all the tips and tricks that the ILM team did and build it like the interior of a starship, right? Something very inspired by Star Wars. And that's obviously an ambitious project, especially working a full-time job and having a bunch of kids. So it never quite happened, but it never left my brain. And several years back for my birthday, my wife said, well, what do you want for your birthday? I said, I want to build a spaceship in the basement. Now, pitching that to your wife for the first time is a little intense and it takes a little bit to help convey that. So initially she said, well, can you just keep it to the corner? Whatever it is you're doing, just keep it in the corner. And so we built kind of a mock-up nav computer from the Millennium Falcon, kind of an inspired thing. And that didn't satisfy the bug I had. And the overall vision was, well, I have a lot of collection, things I had from a kid, things I got as an adult, the things that we collect as Star Wars fans. And I thought, well, you could put it all on a shelf and that's neat, that's good. But what if you could build an immersive space that when you walked into it felt like you were somewhere else. And then the things that you collected were on display in a really unique way. So I spilled out from the corner and kind of encroached a little bit on the rest of the space while she was on a work trip. And she came home and she said, this is interesting. The problem was I never got satisfied because it was never planned. It was a project I just started and took off with it. And I probably spent almost a year on it and gave up. Just, it didn't look right. And then I walked away from the project for almost 2 years. And finally she says, you got to finish this. And I told her, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to start over. And then that led into this whole conversation of filming all of it. So now we completely redid the design. We mocked it all up in 3D. We rendered the space and really spent some time figuring out what it would look like. And then started the build process. shockingly enough, there were a lot of people that enjoyed watching that, which blew my mind completely. So we just kept going with it, and now it's become kind of this ongoing thing where we try to develop new ways of doing things, using new tools, new techniques, trying electronics we've never tried. And we're about now to start getting to the point where we're putting things on display in the space, and I'm super excited with where it's going.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I share your, I was supposed to have a small area in the basement for my shop for like one 3D printer, and now pretty much the whole basement is mine, from my office
Yeah.
to my, display room to my shop. So, and I'm slowly hoping that I can take over even more, but
slow and subtle, and you'll win.
yeah. Yeah,
or convince your wife that she needs to be part of what you're doing, and then it's all bets are off.
Well, I can tell by your videos you get a little bit more support on that side than I do. My wife is a pilot. My wife is
oh wow.
She's very interested in fitness and her job and a lot of other things, and she supports me in what I do, but she's just not a fan. Which actually brings me to my next question. I mean, you seem to have that in your family. Your dad is the Junkyard Jedi.
Yep.
It seems that you have had probably a little bit more intimate knowledge of the R2 builders and astromech builders, probably even before this channel. Your wife seems to be supportive. Why Star Wars? I mean, of all the franchises that are out there, what was it about Star Wars, or what is it about Star Wars that hit you?
I think it starts with my parents, because they were into it. I was born in August of '77, so I always joke that I wasn't in the theater, but I was in the theater, right, when they saw it in May. Sure. And but as early back as I can remember, those were the first toys I had, and that was the first introduction to imagination. And my dad was really hooked on the special effects side of things and how they did things. And my mother was really interested in the story and the writing of it. So it hit them, and that infected us as kids. So it was just part of normal everyday life for us. We watched them all the time, and I just never remember a time without it. And then as I got older and found that I was really kind of interested in building things, because in my family, my dad has always been hands-on. We've always built everything. And when he met my mom, that was the same case with her. They would do elaborate displays for an insurance company that my grandfather owns in the front display windows for holiday scenes, and they were over the top. So it's in our blood to constantly build and create, and Star Wars feels that way. George Lucas started this whole universe out of thin air, and then he brings in Ralph McQuarrie, who does amazing drawings and inspires a generation of people in every walks of life, from artists to model makers and so on. And that was infectious to me. So personally, I think it's because I like the texture that was created. I always say that and people laugh at me, but there's a way that whole environment and universe feels compared to other things. I think it's why I like Alien and Aliens and Blade Runner. They all have that texture to them. And so the building and the texture and the imagination is all combined together, and we've always just been really drawn to it. And it seems that it got stronger as we got older. And one day my dad's here and my parents are visiting, and I say, I want to build a poker table, and I want to have little miniature astromech droids with drink trays up next to the poker table so we can put our drinks there and they don't spill on the table. And you suggest something like that to my father, who we nicknamed the Junkyard Jedi, and the wheels start cranking. And before I know it, we're building a droid out of, I think we went out and got a bowl, like one of those silver bowls that you mix salads and things in, and started putting one together just to see if we could do it. And then that sent my poor dad on a 5-year mission to create an entire astromech droid at 2/3 scale by handcrafting all the parts and pieces at a different scale than everybody else uses, making molds, and now all of a sudden they're multiplying like gremlins with water on them. I think he's built 7 or 8 of them at this point. I can't even keep track. And my poor wife, I've been married 20 years now. I think for the first 5 years, she tried to ignore it and then accepted it. And now she's fully into it. She spent the last 3 weeks working on a Mandalorian costume. She's building the entire kit from scratch. So it's an infection. I don't know if that answers the question or not. It's just an infection, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, who would have thought you could do that with a cake lid and a hunk of sewer pipe? I mean,
right?
That's amazing. So for the viewers, if you haven't seen the channel, you got to watch, because they make these 2/3 size droids out of a length of sewer pipe and a cake lid pan. And his dad has made this jig that you can basically rotate the sewer pipe in and use a router and route out all the shapes. And I mean, it's just amazing. And the way you put it with the, it's the texture. I just finished reading Adam Savage's book, Every Tool's a Hammer. And I mean, there's so much of that, it's so much of, like, when he sees Kubrick's stuff and he's like, not only do I need to know about that prop, I got to know about all the stuff that goes around that prop and the environment that it lives in. And that's definitely a cool reason for Star Wars to hit you.
Sure. It becomes an obsession. Yeah.
So we build a lot of stuff in the 501st, and I've basically run into two different types of builders: guys that plan everything out meticulously and go by the numbers, and then other guys that are, and I think I probably fall into this camp, that are kind of more creative, that kind of see where it goes. Maybe I should 3D print a part. Maybe I'll get a found part. I'll see what happens. Your builds, and again, for the viewers, Brian doesn't just build his room. He builds different things on the channel every week. Everything from a handheld droid collar to the astromech droids itself to a sign for his room to, I mean, you name it, he's building it. And your builds seem to have this really interesting mix of, like, super detailed planning, but then almost always it kind of goes off the rails at some point where you get this creative bent and go a different way. So when you think about the ideas of planning and creativity, sort of spontaneity, how do those play for you as a builder?
It's a weird combination of things that happen. I love makers and builders that do true replica work, because I think that there has to be such an attention to detail to accomplish that, to achieve it. And then for me, it's playing in the universe. So it's easy to plan and then throw everything, like you say, caution to the wind and see what happens. So I usually do a lot of research on what something specific might look like, and then try to understand the rules of why it looks a certain way. What makes it Star Wars? Actually, strangely enough, on the counter here is this panel. So I'm working on the control panels for the bench. That's my version of the Millennium Falcon bench in my world, right? And the understanding of these acrylic tiles are everywhere, these buttons, and then things are outlined, right? There's pinstriping on it all. And then there's random weird parts and pieces. So for me, it's kind of like a toy box where I can say, okay, here's the rules, and I can do this, that, and the other, and break those rules. And you can look at it and still say, wow, that it looks familiar, but I don't know why it looks familiar. The truth is we all do, because we've seen the movies, especially if you're a fan, you've seen them hundreds, if not thousands of times, right? So for me, that is how the planning meets the creativity, is understanding what someone's done, what else could be done in that same space, and what do I need to break the rules how do I break the rules to make sure it still fits and works? We did a Star Wars refrigerator build a couple weeks back for the 4th of July, actually. Rob from Genesis Custom Sabers, if you know him, he threw out a challenge of, if you're going to have a shop, you need a mini fridge, a beer fridge. And then if you're going to do that, we should Star Wars it. I had never even thought about that. So we start figuring out what looks like Star Wars. And then for me, it kind of exploded into the entire cove where I hide where I have the refrigerator stacked, and it kept building. And then I told my wife, we need a Fat Bantha beer company, and we need a label with Fat Bantha on the front of it. It just keeps tumbling out of my brain that way. So there's a plan, but then there's total chaos.
Yeah. And you hit on this a little bit, but I really want to get your thoughts on this for our viewers, because, a lot of people that come into the 501st, they may have made a couple things before, but they really never dove into making anything until they got their first costume. And so,
yeah,
that's their experience. And if you look in again, this is for the viewers, if you look in the cosplay world and the prop making world, what we do in the 501st is called replica making. There are other props and costumes that are called in-universe props and costumes. And so I want to get your thoughts on, and you shared a little bit already, but I want to get your thoughts on what's the difference to you? Do they each have their place? And because to me, I'll be honest with you, making replicas is hard, but making in-universe stuff is extremely hard, because you don't have a recipe. I mean, you have to figure out that it's the greeblies and it's the striping and it's that stuff, So what are your thoughts when I talk about replica making versus in-universe?
It's funny you say that, because I feel the exact opposite. When I see someone that's done a true replica of, just a stormtrooper costume from top to bottom, the attention to detail and the skill you have to be able to create that, to me, is where I struggle. If I'm going to create something that looks exactly like it, I get kind of freaked out. So I'm opposite when I look at, like, this guy behind me we call him Lefty, L3FTY. We call him Lefty because my dad builds this to the T perfect R2 replica, and there's a bunch of leftover parts that weren't quite right or not quite the right size or whatever the case might be. And I'm looking at him going, well, I can't build what he did, but I can sure put one together with a bunch of scrap and it'll look okay. That was my thought process. So I guess to answer your question, I think that for me, following the rules is what stresses me out. And I'm always concerned that I'm going to ruin it or have it not be perfect. But if I take an item or an object and utilize different aspects that you recognize. So on a droid, you recognize the dome, you recognize the arms and feet, but then alter it and put, his collar around his neck and add some other strange bits and pieces. For me, it's just playing with a bunch of parts and then coming out with something that ultimately looks like it does belong. I'm not sure if that answers your question enough.
No, I think it does. It's just interesting that you have a different take on it, because for me, I think the in-universe stuff is you have to figure out what the rules are.
True. Yeah, true. I see what you mean. Yeah. I guess if you're building a costume and you have specs, the 501st, you have to follow the specs so that you can be part of the organization, right? You have to do that. So I guess it's more like, here's your plans and you follow those and you can achieve X. And maybe I get a little suffocated by the plans. When my dad would give me a model as a kid, the most boring thing to me was to put the model together according to the plans. It didn't feel like I was being creative at that point. Whereas I wanted to take it and kit bash it into something completely different. And he and I have always been a little bit different that way. He's incredibly creative, but sometimes when we talk, I can see the communication doing this, because I'm thinking, let's blow open the box and do something else. And if you're building a replica, it's like, well, no, there's already a box. We don't have to blow it up.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very interesting to talk to makers that do things in different space, and your stuff is amazing. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, as a replica maker, I have to remind myself that this is just an in-universe thing, that this came from your brain.
That.
Especially your greeblies. So if you haven't seen Brian's greeblies, I mean, Brian is Ryan's got a problem. He's totally addicted to Greeblies to the point that he makes them out of the craziest stuff in the world. Trash, resin poured into things that you shouldn't be pouring resin into. But yeah, he's got a Greebly addiction, a Greebly problem.
I do. There's a lot of bins and boxes in this shop. And I've gotten my wife to the point where she will actually save juice lids and pill bottles and random stuff she brings home and goes, "Does this work?" Of course it does. We'll put it in that bin.
So you've been doing this for a while. I think you consider yourself a card carrying member of the maker community. Who are the makers that inspire you?
It's a wide. There's a few different categories or buckets, I would say. I'm obviously a big fan of Adam Savage. Watched him for years. Loved the book. All of that. I love the chaos that he seems to live in. I know a lot of people look at him and they look at his shop and I think at one point he referred to it as a carnival exploded, right? There's just something infectious about how he thinks and how passionate he is around it. And you watch a quick video and then suddenly you just want to go build. For a long time, I've been a fan of Punished Props, Bill and Brittany Duran. They do a lot of stuff. He's really heavily into foam smithing. He's got a couple of books, and again, it was great to observe him for so many years, teach a lot of the steps that you need to be able to go and build something. So those two have always been a big inspiration. My father is really what kind of kicked this all off. He and my mother, for that matter. And it's just because whenever we wanted something as a kid, it wasn't like, well, you just go buy it. You asked him for something and he'd look in the direction of where his shop was. And before you knew it, we were out there manufacturing it out of whatever we had around that we could find. And there was never anything that you said, well, you can't build that, right? I mean, that was the challenge you laid out, and then we were off doing it. So it gave me the comfort to know that if I could think of it, I could probably find a way to make it. Now, it's not always going to turn out great, and there's more failures than not. And I think that's part of the enjoyment. When I make a mistake, which happens often, it's always a chance to learn about what it was that went wrong and why did it go that way. Thankfully, it's never caused any loss of fingers or anything like that. But, there's learning how to use the tools properly and learning how far you could take something. We bought a laser cutter this year after waiting we saved for 5 years to get it. And it's amazing, but I always think, wow, I can still do that with a jigsaw or a Dremel tool or whatever the case is. And knowing that we've had that experience with tools, it just opens up such a wide range of things that we can do. And now I have a 6-year-old nephew who he's interested in circuitry, and he's got a great imagination and wants to learn how to put things and build things together. And to me, that's a playground to be able to share that. So, to answer the question, there are people like Adam Savage and Punished Props, and I'm a big fan of Bob Claggett from I Like to Make Stuff because I like the diversity in his builds as well. But then it goes back to my roots being home and learning from family as we were growing up. Yeah.
If you had to pick one of your builds that's your most favorite, or the one that you're most proud of or most interesting, or just the one most salient one that sticks in your brain, which build would it be?
It's like picking your favorite kid from a few of these, honestly. And I don't have kids, which is why I have time to do this. But the droid build is on the top. I'm going to give you 3 because I can't give you one. The droid build was incredible. I built a Han Solo in carbonite several years back, and that felt like wouldn't call it an achievement. It felt like I had arrived, right? Like I'm a maker that actually put that together. And it was a combination of my wife secretly went out and dove into the the deep regions of the RPF, the Replica Prop Forum, to find the right person to buy a cast from. And she did all that on her own and then presented it at Christmas. So it was like this whole thing that she was excited for. So it became kind of our thing. And then, so that prop is really cool to have in your space. And then the room, even though it's not done, is probably at the top just because it's been such a labor of love. And now I'm starting to see it for what it can be, which motivates me to keep working on it. And I think of anything that you can go out and be a maker for, as long as the project you're working on continues to excite you and make you want to move forward and learn different things, that is always going to be the clear winner. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we're wrapping things up, getting toward the end of the interview. You know, a lot of our viewers are new time 501st members. They've just maybe just got interested. They're working on their first costume, maybe their second costume. What advice would you have to a new person coming into this world, either the 501st, the Rebel Legion, the Mando Mercs, the Astromech builders? I mean, I still remember, I've only been in, 3-4 years. And I remember, taking a Dremel tool and taking a razor blade to that big box of plastic that I got, and like right now I'm working on I'm hairing a Chewy mask.
Yeah,
So
I see it,
I'm
man.
learning how to hair, which is nuts.
It's so awesome.
What would you tell somebody that's new to like something that they should think about, something that they should maybe help them with the fear of the build, or just general guidance for somebody new to this building
Sure.
thing?
There's two things I will say. The first is remove can't from your vocabulary. Don't get hung up or look at somebody and say, I wish I could do that, but I can't. Or I wish I had the ability to do that, but I can't. I think that infects people, and it removes all the possibilities. So realize that you can, and that there are multiple ways that you can. That would be the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is research. Pinterest is one of my favorite things on the planet, and my wife makes fun of me every day for it because she introduced it to me several years ago, and she's like, a lot of girls use Pinterest. I'm like, well, there's a lot of smart girls out there because this is awesome. And I've got boards for every single thing that I'm interested in, and it puts it all together in one place that I can research and then dive in. So, sign up to be part of the members groups, the forums, because there are so many people, like within the 501st or the Mercs or the RPF. There are so many people out there that love doing this so much that they will share everything that they've ever learned with you. And that is where true value comes from, is someone has probably already solved a problem that you've ran into. When you talk about automating an astromech, there are guys that have written entire code to completely automate your droid, and all you have to do is click download and upload. You didn't write any code, and now your droid came to life. So being part of all those groups, being active, being a member that's active, contribute where you can, ask for help. People in this community, and the Star Wars makers community too, is even a smaller niche down in that. And I've met some incredible people just being part of those groups and being around everyone. So research and get rid of the word can't.
Great advice. Great advice. And Brian actually has a video with like the top, I think, what is it, the top 10 sites that you should
yeah, we did it was like a top 5 prop resource, which we actually need to update because things have changed so much since we started the channel. But yeah, that's a decent one.
I just watched it the other day, and they're still pretty good. I mean, punishments, and I like to make stuff and all that stuff. So yeah. I'll link that video in the description, and definitely just go check out Brian's channel, to see all the cool things that he's making. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to share with our viewers that we didn't talk about?
I think we covered it all. But I want to say thank you. This is fun. I really enjoy chatting with other people that are excited about this as I am, it can be really infectious. And if just one person out there that was thinking about doing this or wanted to get into it, suddenly tomorrow goes out and buys plastic or a bunch of plastic pieces and starts doing it, then that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Guys, if you're out there listening, if you're part of the Garrison and you like what you see, please hit subscribe, hit the like button, make sure that you get notified when the new videos come out. If you're new to this, if you just stumbled upon this channel and you're thinking, hey, I might like to make a costume, go on over to 501st.com or check us out at garrisontyrannus.com. You're going to find all the information and all the resources that you need to get started, to figure out what costume you want, and to come out and troop. Remember, all you need to be is 18 years old. You got to love Star Wars. You got to have some time to dedicate to this service-based organization. And you got to have a screen-accurate costume for one of the bad guys of Star Wars. And that's what we're here to help you with. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed spending some time with you guys today and some time with my new friend, Brian, the smuggler himself. And I would normally end with saying, may the force be with you. But in Brian's way, I'll say I challenge you guys to go out there and to make something out of nothing.